story. It's great to be back with you this morning. This is actually my 4th of 5 trips to Pennsylvania over the span of 6 weeks. I might as well get a deer hunting license. But I never tire of your fine state or the fine folks like you who call it home. And you must not have tired of New Community Project. You keep sending us money, individually, but also as a congregation. We are very grateful for your ongoing moral and material support for the work that we're trying to do with you in this world. Since I was here last, here's a little bit of how we've used the money that you keep sending us. Along with his ongoing work at our Sustainable Living Center down in Harrisonburg, Virginia, the director there, Tom Benevento, has also been leading workshops for farmers in Mexico and Jamaica. Somebody's got to do it. But talking about climate-resilient food production and eco-friendly coffee production. I guess he met with the Minister of Agriculture from Jamaica, and they want to make all their coffee farms places where birds feel happy and have a home. Up in Vermont, at our Sustainable Living Center there, my friend Pete Antos Ketchum is heavily also involved in food security, as 1 out of 3 people in rural Vermont is food insecure, struggles to have enough to eat on a regular basis. So we have a food justice garden, which we're just expanding this year. We recoup expired or damaged food from Trader Joe's, provide 135 prepared meals each week for low-income people and elderly folks, thanks to a grant, and buy the meals also from a local grocer as well, and they get their products from local organic farmers. So it's kind of a nice virtuous circle there. And we've also coordinated the local wood bank this past winter for home heating assistance. The K through 12 principal up there in that community recently wrote, "Thank you for all your work on behalf of the people of Starksboro. I can't tell you how much peace of mind it gives me to know that our families are supported with their essential needs through New Community Project." There's places for all of us to do good in this world. We just have to find our niche. And our partners abroad. We've sent $200 and some thousand already this year to South Sudan, Congo, Nigeria, Malawi, Rwanda for women's empowerment, girls' education, reforestation, and have a grant ready to go to Nepal in support of our partner Shakti Samuha there. Some of you have met our friends there in Nepal for their anti-trafficking work. We'll send it as soon as we've reached the goal for our Keep 'em Safe campaign, which Jason was referring to, which is trying to keep survivors, young survivors, 5 to 15-year-old survivors from double jeopardy, already traumatized once, now facing it again from their former abusers because they lack a wall around the shelter where they're living. I have a feeling that you're going to shove this campaign over the finish line. It is within sight. Small things, great love. That's how the mountains move. Give yourself away. One of Kim Miedema's ad-lib songs from a national youth conference some time back. Who would want to do this? Give yourself away? In this congregation, you're talking about lightening your load during these Sunday mornings in Lent. Taking on the pain and problems of the planet and its people would seem to be anything but that. Plus, everything in our society says it's all about you, it's all about me, not about them, about spending, not shouldering, about treating ourselves to this or that amenity, not treating others as our brothers and our sisters, or seeing the planet as anything but a resource at our disposal, certainly not as a relationship whose struggles we care a whit about. And this is modeled by our nation, which is in the bottom quintile among rich nations in the world in regard to the proportion of our wealth we give in aid to our needy neighbors. And you should see our military budget. So why not ignore and avoid, or at best offer the crumbs and not the casserole? Well, first of all, this reminds us of the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, the latter lying outside the gate of the former, the dogs licking his sores, and who longed to gather the crumbs that fell from the rich guy's table. That story does not end well for the one who ignored and avoided. In a Zoom session with an ethics class from McPherson College this past week, I referred to this story, saying that going to hell for not acting with compassion and justice made a lot more sense than ending up there for not believing just the right things. Which, of course, is why most churches focus on what we believe rather than what we do, especially when it comes to systemic change, because it's a lot easier in the short run and a lot less burden for us to bear and then joy for us to feel, of course. But of course, in the long run, according to this parable, it increases our burden for eternity. So pay me now or pay me later. Plus, there's just the joy of being a part of doing something good, and you all know how that feels. A recent study from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania showed that doing good releases the brain's feel-good chemicals and called generosity one of the best anti-anxiety medications available. Move over, Prozac. It worked that way for Jamie. She was a high school girl on a learning tour with us to Honduras a couple of years ago. We had been living and working in one of the poorest communities we've ever been to. And some of you have been with us to places where we've been. You know what those communities are like. This was one of the poorest. No running water, no toilets, no child past 5th grade. Well, a few weeks after we got home from that trip, I received a letter from Jamie and $230 in cash. She wrote, "This is the money I'd been saving for high school clothes. But I decided they needed it more than I needed new clothes this year. I'll wear what I wore last year, hit Goodwill. Nobody will know but me." I mean, giving up money for new clothes when there's so much pressure on young women in our society to look a certain way, she must have been high on Jesus. Which brings us to our story today. Look who's high up there. That wee little man himself. We can imagine there are various reasons for Zacchaeus to be up that tree. Lack of physical stature. He was short, according to the story. And also lack of standing in the community. They hated him. He was a tax collector for the occupying power, the Roman government. And he made his money by adding in a kickback for himself to every tax bill that he collected. So he might not have wanted to be down there among the people. Plus, he was also just intrigued by the guy passing through Jericho that day, his hometown, that Jesus of Nazareth, whose reputation had preceded him. So up he went. But before long, as you know, down he came. Our Lord spotted him, called him down, invited him over to Zacchaeus' house. You can imagine him dashing off that text. "Honey, guess who's coming to dinner?" But that wasn't the biggest surprise. So taken by he was by Jesus' hospitality, treating Zacchaeus like a human being, going to his house, even in the face of ridicule from everybody who knew who Zacchaeus really was. Well, I guess they didn't really know who Zacchaeus really was or had the potential to be, which is always what Jesus looked for. So taken was he by Jesus that he joyfully took on the burden of generosity and even reparations, giving half his considerable wealth to the poor and repaying anyone he had overcharged 4 times that. Indeed, today salvation had come to that house as someone had turned from self to others, from keep to give, from just us to justice. And rather than a burden being added, it only seems that a burden was lifted. At New Community Project, we raised over $70,000 for COVID relief in the past 2 years. Not usually the kind of thing we do, that sort of emergency relief, you might say. And that's along with all the other programs we support at home and abroad. And honestly, though, I felt like we were doing people a favor by asking for their money. I think given all the badness we've been going through in our society lately, relationally, medically, economically, politically, people were looking for a chance to do something positive, to do something good for a change. I just got a letter Friday from a woman in Michigan. She had introduced her 9-year-old nephew to A Girl and a Bike program in Malawi. That's where the girls had been walking 14 miles each way to school. We got there, May of 19 was our only visit there, and heard about this, and immediately we launched this program because I was thinking, who doesn't want to see a girl have a bicycle in that situation? But he was so taken by it, his aunt wrote, that he emptied his piggy bank to buy a bike and a scholarship. And the aunt matched it. She wrote, "Thanks for providing this opportunity." Now, here she's framing it as an opportunity. "Thanks for providing this opportunity for our U.S. kids to learn empathy and be able to concretely help other kids who don't have what our kids have automatically." The boy seems to have had no remorse to see his piggy bank plundered for a good cause. So many people are looking for the opportunity to be a part of something bigger and better than the me, more, now fare that our society offers. Those are empty calories that promise what they cannot deliver, the life that is really worth living. I wonder if that's what the guy at the gas station was looking for last Sunday as I returned home to Virginia from my 3rd of 5 trips to Pennsylvania recently. I was filling up for the last stretch on that cheap Virginia gasoline before I got back home to Blue Ridge. And as I walked out of the building toward my waiting rental car, there it was. A huge aluminum can presenting itself at the top of the trash can. Well, you know something about me and trash cans, perhaps, from past interchanges we've had. Treasures await. But this time, I was already feeling bad about all the car driving I was doing that weekend, even though I did squeeze 4 presentations out of the trip, just trying to justify my sins. Still a high carbon price. And I knew that not recycling one aluminum can is like filling it half full of gasoline and pouring it out. That's so energy intensive. That's how much energy equivalent is wasted. And we in the United States throw away 50 billion of them every year. God bless America. Into the trash. So duty called. I do try to be discreet. I have my pride. But not discreet enough in this situation, evidently. For no sooner had I settled into the driver's seat and pitched the can on the back floorboard than I heard a tap, tap, tap on the passenger side window. I looked over. There was a Hispanic guy tapping the glass with 2 empty energy drink cans. "You collecting cans?" he asked. He called through the window. I laughed and said, "Yeah, I guess so." Well, we met, made the handoff, went our separate ways. But having been joined in a come down the tree moment of friendship and solidarity in the cause of doing something better with what we've been given. Yeah, it's some trouble doing better by this earth. And all of you who've tried it, you know. It's some trouble doing better by this earth, but with 1 out of 1,000 human beings dying this year from air pollution caused by fossil fuel combustion, with 3 billion fewer birds singing in the trees and skies in North America over the last 50 years, with climate change a clear and present danger to life on earth. Imagine the burden that will be lifted once we again breathe freely, have our spirits buoyed by bird song, face into a future not of peril but of promise. And there will be resistance, of course, as there are to anybody forging this new path. There will be resistance, of course. There was that in Jesus' day. As we swim against the tide of this take what you can while you can culture. Because we begin to call that culture into question by our actions. And I can tell you as a bicycle rider, and some of you, the rest of you can probably testify to this, people don't take kindly to people presenting another option. But if not us, who? Really, literally, if not now, when? In fact, that's exactly who and when J.B. McKinnon names in his new book, The Day the World Stopped Shopping. Check out the reading list on the New Community Project website. He says, we must stop shopping, but we can't. And it will be our undoing if we don't, because this consumerism and convenience are behind the destruction of our planet. That's how he sees it. In fact, one of his quotes is, more people buying more stuff more often for more money. If you see any other goal of our society, tell me what it is. Indeed, in our pursuit of more, what have we touched we have not bruised? Where have we stepped we have not crushed? And of course, as the planet goes, so do we. In the beginning, Adam came from the Adamah, the human from the humus. The same, of course, holds true today. Yet, McKinnon says he sees rays of hope. Specifically, he mentions voluntary simplicity, a sort of community of resistance to the dominant culture of consumption. People who, strangely find joy in doing with less for soil's sake and for soul's sake, and whose lifestyles first make them a curiosity, then a beacon. He also sees hope in young people even in this society who aren't so far in that they can't see out, and who are also often behind the social and political movements to call for change. He challenges the rest of us to find ways to empower youth and young adults, which I think he means listen, encourage, fund, and then get out of the way. Another new book, The Dawn of Everything, lifts up native cultures around the world as beacons of another way of living. In the Americas, their lack of hierarchy, greed, private property, wanton abuse of the earth was a damning indictment of Christian European culture when the two collided some centuries back. Karen and Jesse from your congregation experienced this way of living on our learning tour to Arctic Village, Alaska, about 20 years ago now. Strange as that seems, it could be that long, but 20 years ago now. We were out on a hike one day with a young Witch-End male, Danny Gimmel. Thought we were just going to see the sights, but instead he spotted 5 caribou as the morning went along. He had his gun with him. He had told us up the hill that day his family needed about 5 to make it through the winter, and there they were, and there they went. Well, we got down to the village the next day. Some of our friends went over to cut up the meat and prepare it. They reported a strange thing. Everybody from the village came by to congratulate Danny on a great outing, a hunting outing, 5 caribou, one afternoon, one man. Everybody took a piece of meat home with them. It was never all about him and his family. It was about his larger family. The invaders saw this as well centuries ago and tried to explain it away, suggesting that these native people were really one of the lost tribes of Israel. How else could they have known such noble things? But the author's main point is that these were not the lost tribe of Israel, but people who had a way of living that we had forgotten how. Actually, both of these books that I've been reading, the recent ones, both of these actually say this, along with other things that I've read lately, that we are on a 1,000-year detour, a misdirection of our better nature. At great cost to ourselves, our communities, our earth, we have lost our bearings. We've kicked God up into the heavens. We've disassociated ourselves from nature. We put ourselves individually on pedestals rather than honoring the community. All these things these authors are saying are a detour from really who we are deep down, making us all like a nowhere man, sitting in our nowhere land, making all our nowhere plans for nobody. Nowhere man, please listen, you don't know what you're missing. Nowhere man, the world is at your command. Isn't it? Isn't our world waiting for somebody or some group of somebodies to say, wait, there's a better path, and then join with them to make it by walking it? That's how this path is going to be made. This path is going to be made by walking it. Just as Jesus and Zacchaeus did that day, in the encounter with something higher and better came the possibility of change, to have that load lightened. For Zacchaeus, yes. But now, hearing his story, for all of us, that opportunity presents itself. At our Sustainable Living Center down in Harrisonburg, someone recently gave us 40 acres and a mule about 6 miles outside of town. Well, minus the mule. For us to create a carbon farm. Large-scale food production done in a way that absorbs greenhouse gases rather than releasing them. Since agriculture is responsible for, some say, 20 to 40% of global climate change impacts. Well, as we were getting ready to work at that farm last year about this time, my colleague Tom, who I've mentioned before, made a point of paying a visit to our new neighbors around there to let them know who we were, what we were going to do there, and especially that this would involve people from different cultures and different flavors. Immigrants from Central America, refugees from Eritrea, college students, tie-dye types. When he visited Larry to the farm just the south of us, Larry told them that he was always glad to see more people involved in farming and food production, but did not want those people from other countries and immigrants taking over and being helped. We need to help our own, so I don't want you having them here. Now, in these days, you don't really know where a comment like that will lead, sadly. Fortunately, in Larry's case, it meant daily trips by our site in his golf cart, keeping an eye on things. Well, of course, our group would wave at him as he rolled by. Then he ended up having some conversations with some of the college kids, and he began to see how hardworking and genial everybody was. Then one day, as the summer went along, he offered to bring up his riding mower and keep the grass trimmed around our garden, for which we rewarded him with baskets of fresh produce. A little while after that, Larry showed up one day bearing gifts. A copy of one of Rodale Institute's original books on organic farming that had been on his shelf for decades. Here, he said, I thought you all could use this. Tom told me that Larry has even begun learning a few words of Spanish. Have we got a deal for our world? The people, yes, offering them an alternative to the pride and prejudice and avarice that we have allowed ourselves to be weighed down by. And to the world itself, God's creation. As McKimmon writes, the end of shopping is a new dawn for wild things. And for us, the burden is no longer ours alone, but we are now joined in this once onerous but now joyful procession into that future of promise for our earth and its people and ourselves. For the glory of God, for the good of our neighbors, for the healing of our earth, and us ourselves. Amen.